President Trump is doubling down on his efforts to restrict both illegal and legal immigration to the U.S. and launching new ICE raids on Democratic cities after this tirade against Somali immigrants in Minnesota.
I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you. Okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. We're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country.
No. Here with me now is President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan. Thank you so much for being here this morning, sir. I do want to start with the new ICE raids in Minnesota. They are sparking widespread fear and uncertainty among people in the Somali community in the Twin Cities. Now, that Somali community in Minnesota is about 80,000 people. The vast majority are U.S. citizens or legal residents. So what is the reason for sending ICE there?
Okay, so I need to tell you about what is happening right now because the Trump administration is facing a legal avalanche that is unlike anything we have ever seen, and Capitol Hill has literally erupted into chaos over the abuses coming out of the Justice Department. We are talking about over 50 lawsuits filed against the administration. We are talking about executive orders that targeted law firms for daring to represent clients Trump does not like. We are talking about security clearances being revoked for political reasons. We are talking about memos ordering the imprisonment of critics in Supermax facilities. And we are talking about protests breaking out on Capitol Hill as the full scope of what this administration has been doing becomes clear. Trump's inner circle, the people he has installed at the Justice Department and throughout the executive branch, they are now facing mounting legal peril as court after court finds that what they have been doing violates the Constitution. This is not normal political disagreement. This is an administration that has been systematically weaponizing the federal government against its perceived enemies. And the lawsuits are piling up so fast that even Trump's loyalists cannot keep up with the legal exposure they are facing. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Well, look, we also know there's a large illegal Somali community there. There's illegal alien community, large illegal alien community there. You know, if you're a U.S. citizen, you know, you have nothing to fear. We're looking for criminal aliens. And also, if you're a resident alien, you have a, you know, like a felony conviction by statute, you could be set up for deportation. So we're looking for public safety threats, national security threats, and illegal aliens. Nothing's changed, Dana, from day one.
I've talked to several state and local officials who've said that the number of Somali immigrants who are living in the U.S. illegally there is very, very small, and that this is about scaring people more than it is about arresting criminals. So what have you actually accomplished with this operation so far in Minnesota?
Well, we're just starting, and I disagree with the fact that people, you know, even we don't know how many illegal Somalis there are, because remember, in the last 4 years in Joe Biden, there's over 2 million gotaways, known gotaways, people caught on video, drone traffic or sensor traffic that crossed the border illegally and weren't apprehended, weren't vetted. And so, you know, what President Trump's doing is fixing the last 4 years of the open border where millions of people are released in this country, many we don't know who they are. So we're going to do the same thing in the Twin Cities we've done across the nation. We're going to focus on those illegal alien public safety threats in these cities. And you know, if they weren't a sanctuary city, I mean, many of these people would be apprehended in the safety and security of the county jail, but because they're a sanctuary city.
Let me explain what has been happening because the details are absolutely insane. Starting in March and April of 2025, the Trump administration issued a series of executive orders targeting specific law firms, not law firms in general, specific firms, WilmerHale, Sussman Godfrey, and others. These are prestigious firms that have done work the administration did not like, either representing clients in cases against Trump or having diversity, equity, and inclusion practices that offended the MAGA base. The executive orders imposed sanctions on these firms. They suspended security clearances for attorneys at these firms. They terminated federal contracts. They essentially tried to destroy these law firms economically for the crime of doing their jobs as lawyers. And the firms have responded with lawsuits alleging that the administration violated the Fifth Amendment, due process, by punishing them without any legitimate legal basis. They are arguing that the administration violated separation of powers by trying to interfere with the legal system, and the courts are listening. Judges are finding that the administration's actions were unconstitutional, and the legal exposure for the people who implemented these policies is growing by the day. But it gets even worse. We now have documentation of what are being called the Bondi Memo and the Blanche Memo, internal Justice Department documents that laid out plans to target critics of the administration. These memos discussed sending people to supermax prisons, the most restrictive and punishing form of incarceration we have. They talked about cutting funding to the American Bar Association as retaliation. They outlined processes for going after specific individuals who the administration viewed as enemies, and the lawsuits alleged that these processes were shams, that they denied basic due process to the people being targeted. The administration was not following the law. They were not providing fair procedures. They were just punishing people Trump did not like and dressing it up in official-looking documents. This is banana republic stuff. This is the kind of thing we used to criticize other countries for doing. And it has been happening here in the United States under the direction of Trump's inner circle at the Justice Department. Come on, are you kidding me right now? The administration issued executive orders targeting specific law firms for punishment. They suspended security clearances, they terminated contracts, they wrote memos about sending critics to supermax prisons, and now there are over 50 lawsuits challenging all of this, and with firms reporting irreparable reputational and economic harm from being barred from federal access. The courts are finding constitutional violations, the legal exposure is mounting, and protests have erupted on Capitol Hill as people demand accountability for these abuses. Trump wanted to weaponize the Justice Department against his enemies, and now his inner circle is drowning in lawsuits because they actually tried to do it. They are finding out that the Constitution still means something, that you cannot just punish people for being lawyers, that you cannot revoke security clearances for political revenge, that you cannot deny due process just because the president is angry at someone. The legal system is pushing back, and Trump's people are in serious trouble. All right, so let me take you deeper into what has been happening, because this is a massive story with multiple threads, and I want you to understand the full scope of what the Trump administration has been doing and why it is causing such an uproar on Capitol Hill and in the courts. This is not just about one bad policy or one overzealous official. This is about a systematic campaign to use the power of the federal government to punish anyone who crosses Donald Trump. Law firms, individual attorneys, critics, opponents. Anyone who has done anything Trump does not like has been targeted for retaliation. And now the lawsuits are piling up, over 50 of them, as the targets fight back and the courts find that the administration's actions were unconstitutional. Let me walk you through the key elements of this story, because each one is significant, and together they paint a picture of an administration that has completely abandoned any pretense of respecting the rule of law. Let me start with the executive orders targeting law firms, because this is one of the most brazen abuses we have seen. In March and April of 2025, the Trump administration issued orders specifically naming certain law firms for punishment. The stated reasons varied. Some were targeted for their diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, others for work they had done in cases involving Trump or his allies. But the effect was the same. The administration imposed sanctions on these firms. They suspended security clearances for attorneys, meaning lawyers who had been cleared to handle sensitive government matters suddenly could not do that work anymore. They terminated federal contracts, cutting off revenue streams that some of these firms depended on. And they did all of this through executive action, bypassing any kind of legislative process or judicial review. Trump just decided these firms should be punished, and his administration made it happen. The firms that were targeted include some of the most prestigious names in the legal profession: Wilmer Hale, Sussman Godfrey. These are not fly-by-night operations or partisan advocacy groups. These are serious law firms with decades of experience representing clients across the political spectrum. They have represented Republicans and Democrats. They have done work for corporations and individuals and government agencies. They follow the ethical rules that govern the legal profession. And they were targeted for punishment not because they did anything wrong, but because they did things Trump did not like. They represented clients in cases against Trump. They had DEI programs that offended conservative sensibilities. They were on Trump's enemies list. And that was enough to bring down the full weight of federal sanctions on their heads. The lawsuits these firms have filed make serious constitutional claims. They allege violations of the Fifth Amendment, specifically the Due Process Clause, that requires the government to follow fair procedures before punishing people. The firms argue that they were given no meaningful opportunity to contest the sanctions before they were imposed. There was no hearing, there was no chance to present evidence or make arguments. The administration just issued orders and expected the firms to comply. That is not how due process works. The government cannot punish people or organizations without giving them a chance to be heard, and the courts are agreeing. Judges have found that the administration's procedures were constitutionally deficient, that the sanctions were imposed arbitrarily, that the firms are entitled to relief. The lawsuits also allege violations of the separation of powers. The argument here is that the executive branch, the president and his administration, cannot simply decide to punish people for engaging in constitutionally protected activity like practicing law. There are limits on executive power. The president cannot just issue decrees that override constitutional rights. And by targeting law firms for their legal work, by punishing attorneys for representing clients Trump does not like, the administration violated those limits. This is not a close constitutional question. The right to counsel is fundamental. Lawyers have to be able to represent unpopular clients without fear of government retaliation. That is how the legal system works. And the Trump administration tried to blow that up because they did not like some of the clients these firms represented. Now let me turn to the internal memos because these documents show just how deliberate and calculated the administration's campaign of retaliation was. The Bondi memo, named after Attorney General Pam Bondi, and the Blanche memo, apparently named after another DOJ official, laid out plans for targeting critics. These were not offhand comments or casual suggestions. These were formal documents outlining strategies for going after people the administration viewed as enemies. And the details are chilling. According to the lawsuits, these memos discussed sending targeted individuals to supermax prisons. Supermax facilities are the most restrictive form of incarceration we have. They are designed for the most dangerous inmates, people who pose serious security threats. The idea that the administration was discussing sending critics, people who had not been convicted of violent crimes, to supermax facilities is extraordinary. It suggests a desire not just to punish, but to inflict maximum suffering on people Trump does not like. This is not law enforcement, this is vengeance. And the fact that it was being discussed in official Justice Department memos tells you everything you need to know about what this administration has become. The memos also apparently discussed cutting funding to the American Bar Association as a form of retaliation. The ABA is the national organization representing lawyers. It sets ethical standards for the profession, it accredits law schools, it plays an important role in evaluating judicial nominees, and the Trump administration was apparently planning to punish it, to cut its funding, because they did not like its positions or its role in opposing some of the administration's actions. This is petty and vindictive. The ABA is not a partisan organization. It represents lawyers of all political persuasions, but because it has been critical of some Trump administration policies, because it has defended the independence of the legal profession, it became a target. The lawsuits allege that the processes outlined in these memos were shams. The procedures that were supposed to give targeted individuals a chance to respond were inadequate or non-existent. People were punished without meaningful opportunity to contest the actions against them. Due process was denied, and the whole thing was designed not to ensure justice, but to maximize harm to people the administration wanted to hurt. This is exactly what the Constitution is supposed to prevent. The government cannot just punish people because it does not like them. There have to be fair procedures. There have to be legitimate reasons. And the administration ignored all of that in its rush to retaliate against critics. The most recent flashpoint has been the revocation of security clearances for individuals like attorney Larry Zaid. These clearance revocations are being challenged as politically motivated, as punishment for things people said or did that angered the administration rather than any legitimate security concern. When you revoke someone's security clearance, you are often destroying their career. Many attorneys depend on clearances to do their work. If you take that away without legitimate reason, just because you do not like someone, that is an abuse of power. And it is exactly what the lawsuits allege has been happening throughout the Trump administration's Justice Department. The scale of the legal response is unprecedented. Over 50 lawsuits have been filed challenging various administration actions. Law firms are reporting irreparable reputational and economic harm from being barred from federal access. Individual attorneys are fighting clearance revocations. Organizations are challenging funding cuts. The courts are being flooded with cases, all alleging some variation of the same thing. The Trump administration has been using the power of the federal government to punish its enemies, and the targets are fighting back. Capitol Hill has erupted in response to all of this. Protests have broken out as people demand accountability. Members of Congress are calling for investigations and hearings. The chaos is visible. You can see it in the news coverage and the social media posts and the crowds gathered outside government buildings. People are angry. They see an administration that has abandoned any pretense of following the law. They see a Justice Department that has been weaponized against the president's political opponents, and they are demanding that something be done about it. All right, so let me break this down into what it actually means and why you should care about it, because this is not just about lawyers suing the government. This is about whether the federal government can be used as a weapon against anyone the president does not like. This is about whether the Constitution actually protects people from arbitrary punishment. And this is about what happens when an administration decides that political loyalty matters more than the rule of law. Let me give you the key takeaways from everything we have covered. Point number one, the targeting of law firms is an attack on the legal system itself. This is important to understand because it goes beyond just punishing a few organizations. When the government punishes law firms for representing clients, when it sanctions attorneys for doing their jobs, it sends a message to every lawyer in the country. Be careful who you represent. Be careful what cases you take. Because if you cross the administration, if you represent someone the president does not like, you could be next. That chilling effect is devastating for the legal system. Criminal defendants have a right to counsel. Civil litigants have a right to be represented. The whole system depends on lawyers being willing to take on unpopular cases and unpopular clients. And when the government starts punishing firms for doing exactly that, it undermines the foundation of how our legal system works. This is not just about Wilmer Hale or Sussman Godfrey. This is about whether any lawyer can feel safe representing anyone Trump considers an enemy. Point number two, the internal memos reveal a deliberate strategy of retaliation rather than legitimate law enforcement. The Bondi memo and the Blanche memo are not evidence of an administration trying to enforce the law. They are evidence of an administration planning revenge, discussing supermax prisons for critics, planning funding cuts for organizations that oppose them, outlining procedures designed to punish rather than provide due process. These documents show intent. They show that the people running the Justice Department were not thinking about justice at all. They were thinking about how to hurt people the president does not like. And when those documents come out in litigation, when judges see what was being discussed internally, it strengthens the constitutional claims being made against the administration. You cannot argue that your actions were legitimate law enforcement when your own memos reveal that the goal was retaliation. Point number three, over 50 lawsuits represent an unprecedented legal assault on administration policies. I want you to absorb this number. Over 50 lawsuits. That is not a handful of disgruntled people filing nuisance claims. That is a massive legal response to what the administration has been doing. It means that lawyers and firms and organizations across the country looked at what was happening and concluded that it was so egregious, so clearly unconstitutional, that they had to fight back in court, and they are winning. Judges are finding constitutional violations. Injunctions are being issued. The administration is losing case after case. This is the legal system doing exactly what it is supposed to do, pushing back against government overreach and protecting constitutional rights. Trump wanted to weaponize the Justice Department, and now his administration is being buried in lawsuits challenging exactly that weaponization. Point number four, the Capitol Hill protests show that public outrage is reaching a breaking point. This is not just happening in courtrooms, it is happening in the streets. People are protesting outside government buildings. They are demanding accountability. They are making their anger visible and loud. The combination of legal challenges and public protests creates enormous pressure on the administration. It makes it harder to sustain these abusive policies. It makes it harder to pretend that everything is normal. And it creates political costs for anyone who continues to support what the administration is doing. Trump's inner circle wanted to punish critics and consolidate power. Instead, they have ignited a backlash that is growing by the day. The protests on Capitol Hill are just the visible manifestation of a broader anger that is spreading across the country. Point number five, the legal exposure for Trump's inner circle is real and growing. The people who implemented these policies, the officials who signed the executive orders, who wrote the memos, who carried out the clearance revocations and contract terminations, you see, they are now personally exposed to legal consequences. When courts find that government actions violated the Constitution, the officials responsible can face liability. They can be named in lawsuits. They can be required to testify about what they did and why. They can face professional consequences and potentially criminal referrals depending on how egregious the violations were. Trump's loyalists thought they were safe, that they could do whatever Trump wanted. and face no consequences. They are discovering that is not how the legal system works. The Constitution still applies. The courts still function. And officials who violate people's constitutional rights can be held accountable even if the president told them to do it. Here's the bottom line. The Trump administration has been systematically targeting law firms, attorneys, and critics for punishment through executive orders, security clearance revocations, contract terminations, and other abusive actions. Internal memos reveal that this was a deliberate strategy of retaliation, not legitimate law enforcement. Over 50 lawsuits have been filed challenging these actions, and the courts are finding constitutional violations. Protests have erupted on Capitol Hill as public outrage over DOJ abuses reaches a breaking point, and Trump's inner circle, the officials who implemented these policies, are facing mounting legal peril as the consequences of their actions become clear. This is what weaponization of the Justice Department actually looks like. Not the imaginary persecution that Trump complained about for years, but real, documented, unconstitutional use of government power to punish political enemies. Trump wanted to go after law firms that represented people he did not like. He wanted to revoke clearances from attorneys who crossed him. He wanted to send critics to supermax prisons and cut funding to organizations that opposed him. And his inner circle tried to make it happen. They issued the orders, they wrote the memos, they carried out the punishment. But now the legal system is fighting back. Courts are finding that what the administration did was unconstitutional. Lawsuits are piling up, injunctions are being issued, the targets of retaliation are being vindicated, and the officials who thought they could abuse their power without consequences are discovering that there are consequences. The Constitution is not just a piece of paper, it is a living document that courts will enforce. And when the government violates people's rights, when it punishes them without due process, when it uses executive power for political revenge, there will be a legal reckoning. Capitol Hill is in chaos. The protests are growing, the lawsuits are multiplying, and Trump's inner circle is in trouble. They thought they were invincible. They thought that loyalty to Trump would protect them from accountability. They thought they could do whatever they wanted because the president wanted it done. They were wrong. The legal system is proving them wrong. The courts are proving them wrong. And the American people, protesting in the streets and demanding accountability, are proving them wrong. This is a turning point. The administration's abuses have been exposed. The constitutional violations have been documented. The legal challenges are succeeding, and the people responsible are facing the consequences of what they did. Trump wanted to weaponize the government against his enemies. Instead, he has created an army of plaintiffs who are using the courts to hold his administration accountable, and they are winning. The chaos on Capitol Hill is just the beginning. As more lawsuits proceed and as more evidence comes out about what the administration was doing, the pressure is only going to increase. Trump's inner circle wanted power without accountability. They are getting accountability without mercy. And the legal peril they face is real, growing, and entirely of their own making. All right, that is what I have got for you today. This story is massive, and there are over 50 lawsuits working their way through the courts right now. Make sure you are subscribed and you have notifications turned on, because there are going to be major developments as these cases proceed. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Should Trump's inner circle face consequences for these abuses? Do you think the courts will hold them accountable? I want to hear from you, and I will see you in the next one.